I'm Greg DePalma, and you're listening to Prime Sports Tennis with Andrea Leanne on the Prime Sports Radio Network. And on today's show, it's Caroline Wozniacki's world, and we're all just living in it. The 27-year-old from Denmark not only recently became engaged, but she also captured her first ever Grand Slam title and recaptured the distinction of being the top-ranked player in the sport. Andrea will explain how she did it her way, and we'll also try and figure out what in the world is going on with Simona Halep from the latest photo taken of her in a hospital bed. That and much more, including Roger gets another slam win, as the Prime Sports Tennis Show on Prime Sports Network starts now. All right, it's Monday, the 29th of January, 2018, and thanks again for tuning in to Prime Sports Tennis with PSN tennis editor and former top 15 player in the world, Andrea Leanne. And Andrea, before we get into that very strange photo, Caroline Wozniacki is the real story, and the sport of tennis couldn't be happier to have a new first-time Grand Slam champ for women's tennis in 3 of the last 4 slams. So how did she do it?
Well, congratulations, Caroline Wozniacki. She beat Simona Halep 7-6, 3-6, 6-4. She beat Simona fair and square. She beat her on every single level, and she deserves full credit for the victory. Simona did her best, and Greg, it was some of the best tennis I've ever seen in the women's game in that first set. Both women played their hearts out. They used everything they had, every resource, mentally, physically, and I just think after that first set, they just, emptied the tank, and the second set was about who could actually stand up and survive to carry on and take the match. But the tennis was phenomenal. We saw the rallies and these long, extensive rallies, Simona trying to be aggressive, trying to be offensive, and of course, Caroline did come out there firing. She did come out aggressive in the beginning, but ultimately, as the match went on, really returned to her roots, her counterpuncher roots of where it was defense that won the day for Caroline Wozniacki in this match. It was her superior ability to cover the court, the physical resource she had left, superior to Halep's, and she deserves full credit for being able to put the ball back in the court, make Simona play that one more shot, and you have to say, she said it today, I did it my way. I proved everyone wrong, and at number 1 in the world now, and her first Grand Slam title, she has every right.
Yeah, and let's remind everybody who might be new to tennis that Caroline has been the top-ranked player in the world already, so it's a heck of an accomplishment to be able to put something like that together over, I guess about a 5-year span since her last 6 years, maybe, since the last time she was number 1?
Well, Caroline, of course, was ranked number 1 in the world. She did not win a Grand Slam title during that period between 2010 and 2012 because a lot of players felt that she got the points for the ranking on the accumulation, not really the quality of the result, and that she just played so many small tournaments and raced around the globe, playing so many events, and doing well, had good results, obviously, certainly quality results, but she had so many of them that she accumulated more points than anyone else, and that's why she became number 1 in the world. That really wasn't based on the fact that she was beating the top players. We should also mention, of course, Serena Williams was out during that period of time, as she is now, quite frankly. But the bottom line is that this is what happens in sport, Greg. And, I'm so happy for Caroline to win this Grand Slam title after, she took such shots and such low blows last year, and people really were not very kind. And, yeah, there was question about whether she had what it took, and there was question about whether she should continue to just work solely with her father, Peter, as coach, and not have someone else travel with her, not have someone else coach her. She's gone through many of them. She had Thomas Hogshead. She's had, tons of coaches. She had Sasha Bajan as a quote-unquote, I want to call him an assistant coach to the father, I think she said, helping out and trying to give some input and trying to get Caroline to play more aggressively. I guess the old joke is, how many people does it take for Caroline to come up with the answers on her own? Because you can't really tell Caroline to do something. She has to really find those answers within, and we applaud that.
Sure.
We're happy when players can find the answers from within, because that's only when they really are invested and have the belief to then execute on court. And so you could tell Caroline Wozniacki 50 million times, you're almost 6 feet tall, you have the frame, you have the build, you have the innate power, you can be more offensive. You don't have to sit behind the baseline 5 to 10 feet and sit there, just putting the ball back. And she is not going to believe it until she comes to that conclusion herself. Now, she says, of course, she did it her way. I agree. Defense did win the day for her in the end. And she just said to herself, I've beaten Simona before. That psychological edge, Greg, that we talked about in the preview of this definitely came into play. The fact that she had beaten Simona as recently as 8 weeks ago in Singapore gave her the confidence that her game was enough to do it. She didn't have to do anything differently. And I will say, though, in all fairness, and looking at the picture, this is not the same Caroline I saw 2 years ago.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
This is not the same Caroline who was taking a ton of losses that caused her to drop to 74 in the world. That Caroline was 10 feet behind the baseline, hitting the ball short, had nothing on him, no muscle behind her ground strokes, and really proved no threat to any of these players like Ostapenko and the big hitters. I mean, Ostapenko went through her 4 consecutive times without even blinking. And that was because Caroline did not have any depth on her ground stroke. She wasn't pinning them back. She wasn't doing anything to keep them off guard. And in this match, as we've seen with Caroline in the last month, including which I think was her best tennis at the WTA Finals, I don't think either Halep or Wozniacki played their best tennis in Melbourne, other than that first set in the final. Caroline, to me, was far better in the WTA final. But in this final, she was able to, again, defense, offense. And we've heard her mention this, Greg, a few times now. So she has come to the feeling that she does need some offense in there. She can't just sit back. And so this is a different Caroline. She did it her way. We'll give her credit there. But to me, it's just such a great story. You know, she's so pretty. She's such a fresh face. She does everything right, Greg. She's humble. She keeps her head down low. She puts her game face on when she needs to. She doesn't get sucked into all the, the nasty retorts, which she could have. And she's really taken the high road in every single venue. And I give her enormous credit.
Now, what do you think this means for her moving forward? Because winning a Grand Slam, we saw, and you see, we can't compare it to Sloane winning her first or Yelena winning her first because of the fact they're so much younger. Caroline has had a lot more tennis, a lot more of a longer career to be able to, especially a second chance at number one. Now she gets the slam. So, and she's been around for so long that I don't think people realize she's only 27. So what does this mean for her going forward, and how good can she continue to be?
Well, 27 actually is relative in tennis terms. You see players now in their mid-30s. You would think, oh, she could have another 5 or 6 years. No, this is a particular situation for Caroline where I think she's capping off a tremendous career, a Hall of Fame career, which we believe she had before the Grand Slam victory. She's always had a Hall of Fame career. Her numbers are just unbelievable. I think people forget, the real substance to her career until you look at these numbers that she has built. I mean, it's so impressive. But to me, this is Caroline. We said last year when Serena won the Australian that she had turned the page. We felt that she had turned the page, that she was looking towards her personal life and was going that avenue, that was going to be the priority. I agree with the same thing with Caroline. Yes, we hope she stays around a long time. She is such a great spokeswoman. She is such an attractive personality to have on the women's tour. I mean, boy, Greg, 120,000 more fans to our social media every time I tweet out a picture of Caroline Wozniacki. So she is a very popular person. Now, I hope she gets her L cover, she said on the podium, and gets her name on some sort of branding product. But for Caroline, I think that right now she's engaged. She will be getting married this year to David Lee, the former NBA star. And I definitely think that she has turned the page. It will not surprise me in the least if she retires by the end of this year.
Wow.
With her type of game, Greg, when you're talking about a counterpuncher who has had to invest so much physical energy, running down balls and the physical impact that has taken, I think counterpunchers do have a tendency to wear more quickly than the hitters.
Okay.
And she has had to put a lot of miles in, and I think she feels she's done her due in her career. She's achieved everything she wants, and it will not surprise me if she turns the page.
All right, now this photo thing with Simona is making a lot of her fans angry. It's making headlines, and we're trying to read between the headlines to try and figure out exactly what's going on here, because how strange is it to find out, if you're a fan, especially, you've been through the wars with your favorite player, and then within hours after a very tough loss, maybe the toughest loss, she's also trying to break through and win her first Grand Slam, being number one, and so forth. And she had played so well through the tournament, so we understand how emotional it was for her and her fans. But then just hours later, you look on social media and you see Simona look like she's asleep on a hospital bed with IV being pumped into her. Very strange. What was that? What's going on here?
Well, first of all, we want to let our fans know we've had over 374 is my last count about 20 minutes ago of fans asking if she's okay. Simona Halep is fine. She is okay. Obviously, I'm sure she's depleted mentally and physically, but she's off to holiday with her mother, and she got on the plane, and she's not in the hospital. She's not on an IV anymore. She's fine. So everyone can just rest assured, as Simona's father actually had to issue a statement. The response in Romania was so emphatic about, concern of how Simona was. She's okay. She'll be just fine. And I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this, Greg, because I'll tell you, this is Caroline's moment.
Sure.
Caroline beat Simona fair and square. She was superior mentally and physically and tactically. And this is not about Simona today. This is about Caroline. But what we will say about the picture, since we have had so much response and question about it, as you mentioned, it was this picture was tweeted live on air by ESPN. Chris Fowler said it was given with Darren Cahill, her coach's permission. And so obviously in the heightened awareness in our environment today of young female athletes and making sure that they're protected in every way, there was some response as to why this was taken while she was asleep. We did see a photo of Simona after the Davis victory where they had a behind-the-scenes thing of her, after the match, icing her Achilles and having her food and smiling at the camera. So you obviously knew she was had given her full consent. This people didn't know. And obviously, had ESPN issued the photo saying this is with Simona's consent, that would have solved the problem right there. But they didn't. And, the question is, it's really not fair to put Darren Cahill in the position of giving his permission because he has nothing to do with it. He's not her guardian. So it did raise a question. And I'm going to go with my vibe on this. My vibe is, and I saw Darren Cahill's tweet today, that she was inseparable with her mother the entire time. And knowing Darren to be the good guy that he is, I'm going to go with the fact that I do believe she did know about the photo, and whether she publicly gives consent or not, I don't think people need to be concerned about it. I think that to me, it would have been nice to have that public consent, but to me, this was Simona. Perhaps someone in the camp wanted people to know how physically depleted she was and the toll it did take. And to me, that goes back to then you look at, the way she's playing in her tennis, because that's what really our concern is about her tennis. We look at her game. She played an incredible first set. She showed incredible fight the whole fortnight. And I have to tell you, the speech she gave post-match to the final was the most gracious, endearing, classy speech I've ever heard from a runner-up. She just did a beautiful job, and it's a shame that wasn't the last word. That really should have been the last word instead of this photo.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, you look at Simona's game, and let me tell you, she is maximizing everything, Greg. I'm not surprised she ended up in the hospital with an IV, because mentally and physically, she is maximizing it all, and she is playing offense for a more, smaller woman out there. She doesn't have the 6-foot frame of all these big hitters, and to be generating the winner she is, and also playing the counterpuncher and the running she does, I give her full credit. We'll have to see, though, if trying to be more offensive is going to take its toll. Is she going to have injuries? Can her body keep up? This is something we're going to have to watch the rest of the year. I actually did, though, ask a few players what their feeling was, because they're the experts. They know Simona, and they said they actually didn't see a lot different, that Simona has always played the same type of tennis. And I went back and looked at her stats from actually that final she played against Sharapova in 2014, where she reached the final. And again, she was 6 for 10 at net. And in this match, I think there were about 218 points or so, give or take. She went to net about 8 times. And so, sometimes the couple big flashy swing volleys give you the impression that she is constantly at net and constantly attacking. And I do think that she did exploit every opportunity. But to me, what really was the takeaway from the match was, as Chris Clary said in his piece for the Times, were the long extended points, and who won those long extended points. And yes, we saw Caroline try to come to net on one of the big ones in that third set. And I saw when she finally had this long point, came in and made the volley winner, her whole camp stood up. But I said, you know what, that's always the kiss of death. And sure enough, she lost the next bunch of points, lost the game. And in Caroline's head, I think at that point, she said, you know what, I'm going to do what I do best. And if I lose, I'm going to go down doing what I believe in, and that's being the counterpuncher, and that's just getting one more ball into play and making a tired Simona try to come up with the winner. And whereas I think that, for Simona, there is still this gray area as to when to play defense, when to play offense. But in the end, Greg, I applaud both women. But for me, it'll be interesting to see how the year goes on for Simona Halep, because there's so many other storylines in this Australian Open we have to take away from. Angie Kerber, great story. The turnaround of Angie Kerber. She deserves a lot of attention. I loved seeing Madison Keys back in the quarterfinals. Yes, she had a tough loss there, but boy, is it great to see an American in the quarters. And so I think that we have to look at these other storylines and see how women's tennis is evolving. Because the only question I asked myself during the whole match was, what is Serena thinking?
Yeah, well, that is something that we hopefully will know real soon. I know that she's going to be playing Fed Cup. We talked about that last week. That happens to be right in my backyard, so I can't wait to see you and head on over to Asheville and find out how Serena's doing. I will say this before we move over to the men's side regarding this photo and whether or not it was because you got to believe in it, and I get where you're coming from, and I kind of I think you're spot on as far as the camp thinking that maybe this was necessary. And I think the only reason that I could think of why the camp would think it's necessary PR-wise is because they're probably reading too much into it. Maybe they're taking things a little bit too hard, too close to heart when it comes to criticism that you do get, whether it's on TV or any sort of social media platform, because there's so much out there that if you bother yourself with it, if you immerse yourself within the criticism, I think this is the result, because I think we talked about the whole 2 weeks, nothing but applauding, and we still applaud everything that Simona did in these 2 weeks to put herself in a position. The win over Kerber was fantastic. To lose to Caroline Wozniacki with her playing this was her time. Simona still has an opportunity to get her moment in the sun, but it was but instead of just, okay, that's the way it is. Two girls went up head to head. Everybody applauds Caroline for the win. Everybody applauds Simona, even though she didn't get over the hump, which everybody's been criticizing her recently for not being able to do. Fact is, neither one of these girls had gotten over the hump recently. Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to lose. And instead of kind of just letting everybody applaud Simona for the effort, this is what happens. This is what they felt they needed to come out and use maybe as an excuse or just to show everybody that, hey, Simone is, she's the real deal, and she really gave her all, and you need to give her credit when the credit was already there.
Well, you're right, and as I said, it would have been great had they just had the final word be her speech, her post-match speech, which was absolutely terrific. She just did a brilliant job with that speech. The lesson learned, on everyone in the entire chain of event is that idea to put the picture out.
Yeah.
But, I also, looked to what Caroline said the very next day, and is continuing to say today, is that, she doesn't believe in all these entourages. She doesn't like all these people. She wanted to have her father there because she knew that, that she had her back covered, that he was going to, protect her, had her interests at heart, and she never one day had to, question anything. And, I do believe that the way Caroline has done things is to be looked at, because I think the players have to really have a very fine-tuned machine behind them. You can't have a lot of moving parts. And I do think the Halep camp still has a lot of moving parts, and that's what makes it very confusing for her fans to really understand what really is going on. But let me tell you one thing. If anyone underestimated Simona's fight and grittiness,
yeah.
She is very gritty on and off court, believe me, and she is not happy, is clearly not happy about this loss. So I like the whole thing, but as you said, it was great for Caroline. A lot of lessons to be learned from Caroline. I think we are seeing more parents out there. And let's face it, as Darren Cahill said this morning, she was inseparable from her mother the entire fortnight. They were entwined. There's a picture of the two of them. So I think it's great that her mother is there and clearly had to be cognizant of what is going on. And I do think that we will see more of this, Greg, on tour with the women especially. It's interesting because, the WTA has done everything it can, Greg, to protect these players. I mean, they have a coach's code of conduct. They have really circled the wagons on every different venue of every different kind of subject you can think of. And this has been explored. We made the calls. And so there's no question to me that the WTA is doing everything it can to support the players. And so you hear Novak come out today with more about the player union, and you hear, the Times piece about Lucic and a few others, pining in on the whole thing. And, they really have to, I think, at this point, Greg, decide if they're going to stand up and, take responsibility and be accounted for in what they want. You can't ask organizations and individuals to continue to go to bat for you over and over again, and then when it comes down to it, not want to take responsibility, not want to speak up, not want to show up for the meeting, and expect everyone to do your dirty work for you. This is where these top players have got to really, if they want what they want in these different platforms and more money and more this and more that, they have to have the backbone then to fight for it and put their name on it.
And for what it's worth, my advice to Simona Halep, just keep doing what you're doing, because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna win a slam.
Yep.
And then all of this will be behind you. But don't overthink things, because sooner or later, when you keep playing this hard and this well, you're gonna break through and you're gonna win it. And her time is gonna come. So.
Well, she's a tough cookie, that's for sure, and I don't underestimate how tough she is, and
No.
She certainly has the right grittiness to become a Grand Slam champion. So I agree with you; she will have her turn, but it's Caroline's turn, and good for women's tennis. I mean, as I said, you put out a picture of Caroline, and boy, will that male audience follow.
Yeah. Because thank goodness for the women's side, as we've been saying now for about a year and a half, because Roger Federer once again is like the story on the men's side, and in some parts, sure. I mean, like what you said last week, thank goodness with a lot of the upsets that Roger was there in the final, and you know what, that is great. But sooner or later, you do want somebody to beat Roger in the final. Having Roger there is great, and even having him win every once in a while still at this point is great, because he's the greatest of all time. But it would be nice to see one of these other players step up, and especially when it doesn't look like Roger is on top of his game 100%, you would think, okay, now's your chance. But it just shows you how great he is, that even when he's not playing his best tennis, he's still the best.
Well, exactly. And this is what we said. Everyone said, oh, well, we can't wait for the women and men's final because they're going to be playing their very best tennis. No way. When you're under that type of pressure, fighting for the highest accolades of your sport. I mean, we have to remember these athletes, and the girls are 26, 27. They're very young. Roger, of course, 36. Cilic older as well. They're fighting to be the very best in the world at what they do. We're asking so much of them at such a young age, especially with the ladies. And so how could they possibly play their best under these circumstances, under the incredible pressure and expectation? So, yeah, you're right. Roger actually did not play his best this tournament. I don't think he had a great draw. He didn't really have to play any top stars, and of course he got, with Chung, he got the retirement because Chung's blisters were too tough. And then with Cilic, though, who he beat at the Wimbledon final, with Cilic injured, though, this was a different match. Cilic was all there physically, and the biggest concern obviously was the fact, Greg, they closed the roof, and it changed the conditions, and to some people that favored Roger. And Cilic, of course, is mouthing off today that was not fair. He did not agree with that decision. Well, it's always easy in retrospect not to agree with the decision. I'm not surprised to see, the loser saying that, because, obviously that's their feeling. But had Cilic been playing Chung, would he have had a problem with the roof being closed, where it would, quickens the atmosphere, quickens the conditions, and favors the more offensive, aggressive player and the big server like he is? In fact, Greg, if you look at the stats, he had the faster serve. He had some of the better percentages when it came down to as far as points won. in that service. And so he had his chances. Of course, it went to 5 sets. It went the distance.
Yeah.
We thought Roger would actually have an easy time of it because he was just too fast and too quick and too agile, had too much of a complete game to really, get a push from Cilic. But Cilic is the veteran. He's savvy. He's smart. And he wasn't fazed by Roger, who he beat at the U.S. Open final in 2014. So it was a great match. I enjoyed seeing, as you said, Roger find a way to win when he wasn't playing his best tennis. And, of course, the emotional response to the victory afterwards was always, just kind of so endearing to see from him, because here he is at this stage in his career, still so touched by, the accolades and the victory. And, of course, going over to his wife, Mirka. And I have to tell you, the refreshing thing about Roger is not only the tennis, it's just the whole picture, Greg. It's just the incredible way they do things on and off court. It's just the whole team, the team he assembled, the way they conduct themselves, the way they do business. And there's just it's such clarity and such, all above board. And everything is just done correctly. There's no gray area. There's no fuzziness. He is just above board in every single thing he does. And that's why he's the role model for the players and for everyone else, because he is just really conducted himself like the true professional in everything he does. So I give him credit because we need him around. We need him to be the role model. We need his mentorship. The players need it. The game needs it. And he has spearheaded every major issue the tour has dealt with. And so to me, yes, I think it's great that Novak's spending all this time while he obviously has some issues with his elbow and isn't really playing tennis. But I will always go back and take my lead from Roger Federer.
Yeah, and look, I don't know. I guess we all don't know when Roger is going to decide to hang it up, but I kind of hope that he just, as much as I don't like him hogging up all the Grand Slams all the time, I think he should just keep playing as long as he's winning all these slams and forcing the younger generation to beat him. And as soon as that starts happening on a consistent basis or a semi-consistent basis, then he can start thinking about, all right, now I've done my part. They're finally beating me. They're finally stepping up and beating me. Now it's their turn.
Well, of course, and it was really interesting to see the conversation he had with Sasha Zverev after Zverev lost in that very disappointing match to Chung. Showed nothing in the fifth set, losing 6-0. Where Roger took him under his wing on court in practice while he's still in the tournament, by the way. And of course, they were teammates in the Laver Cup, Roger's event last year, where Roger invited these young guys onto the team to be the teammates, to really see how they practice, be a part of it all. I think that this is going to be a real key for this next guard, is really to understand what it takes by spending time with Roger or Rafa, because they have really shown how it is what you need to do, and whether it's Jack Sock or Zverev or Kyrgios. It really has its place. And so I hope Roger never goes anywhere, because not only he comes up with the ideas off court and court. That Laver Cup to me was phenomenal. They they highlighted it at the Australian Open. And to me, the fact is that they're able to continue throughout the year having these relationships with these young guys and build on that. I think does help this next guard. And to me, it's one of these things where when you look at Roger and the legacy he will lead, Mike, I will guarantee you his legacy, of course, on court is unparalleled. He now has 20 Grand Slam titles, more than any man. Will he reach Margaret Court's 20, and break the record before Serena? Who knows? That seems to be the big question now. But I think that his legacy actually off court will be just as important.
And as far as the state of the game on the men's side compared to the women's side, because it's completely different.
Well, the injuries, this is the big issue. And did we need talking about putting out photos? Did we really need that photo of Chung's feet?
No, not at all.
It was quite graphic, and we never doubted. We never doubted that he had problems with his feet.
Yeah,
we never doubted
we?
that Simona obviously had trouble on court physically.
Yes.
But thank you very much for the details. Maybe too much information. I think the injury is an issue, and everyone's trying to say the strings, the court surface, they're playing the players too much. The tours are having them crisscross the globe, and they're not really taking their interests at heart. I personally go back to what are they doing off court in their training routines, and we're seeing a lot of injuries with joints. You can build up the muscles, Greg. You can strengthen the muscles, the legs, the arms, that type of thing. But you can't strengthen joints. And we're seeing a lot of injuries with joints. And to me, that says, what are they doing in their off-court conditioning? And I think that's one of the prevalent areas that players should go back to and saying, am I putting too much emphasis, too much stress on these joints? Am I overdoing it in these routines and this off-court stuff? Because it's so sophisticated now, and the technology is so enormous. I mean, this is something we never had in my day. And the different things these players go through to get into the shape they need now to compete is just an incredible thing to see. And so I'm beginning to wonder, though, if what they're putting their bodies through in preparation for the tournaments is actually the issue, not really the tournaments themselves.
All right. Now, coming up, we've got Davis Cup. There's a couple of events on the WTA Tour, one in Russia, one in Taiwan. We've got the Davis Cup on the men's side. And so anything in particular as far as, let's stick with the U.S. fans. What should the U.S. fans
I
be?
was so happy to see Eric Buderak, his tweets today. He's, of course, they play Serbia. The U.S. plays Serbia in Serbia. I mean, this is a tough match. I don't think Novak is playing, but still, when you have to go over and look like red clay to me, it's going to be an incredible match. And they have Isner, Query, of course, Stevie Johnson and Ryan Harrison. The only one they don't obviously have is Jack Sock, but that's okay. We've asked Jack to manage his schedule better so he can peak at the right times. Look, it's a great team. They're obviously not instinctively clay quarters, so it's going to be a big challenge. But, I'm excited for them. And, of course, everyone is just beyond thrilled that Serena and Venus and Coco, named to be also mentioned, and is going to really represent the United States in their Fed Cup tie later in February in Asheville, North Carolina, February 10th and 11th. And it's going to be an incredible event, Greg. Absolutely incredible. The USTA has pulled out every stop to make it phenomenal for the fans and for everyone viewing. And look, we're now going to get to see finally Serena back in her first competitive formal match back since obviously the birth of her child. And so this is going to be a monumental moment, and all eyes will be on it.
Yeah, I can't wait. And that's going to be coming up real soon. A couple of weeks, we'll be getting together for that. So really looking forward to it. Andrea, thanks a lot. It was fun covering the Australian Open for 2 whole weeks. We had a good we had about a good 10, 12 hours of coverage for the Australian Open.
It was unbelievable. It was absolutely, you were great, Greg. I mean, you cover Major League Baseball and NFL and all the major sports, and so to do this and the Australian Open was quite a feat. But you were great. You did all your homework. You watched all the matches. Talking about this was so easy to you.
I appreciate it.
A job well done.
Thank you.
It was really phenomenal. It's another great Australian, and we're going to have to see now. Will this set the tone for the year like last year's did? We'll have to see what tone this set, what messages and lessons were learned. Yeah, and
if it does like it did last year, it's going to be a great year for tennis, and we're looking forward to it. We'll be here every week, and of course, don't forget when the big events come around, we'll have 2 weeks worth of full coverage again, but not until the French Open, even though we do have a couple of big events coming up in California and Florida real soon. But thanks again for checking back with us here for another edition of Prime Sports Tennis on the Prime Sports Radio Network with Andrea Leand. We'll see you again next week, and enjoy your tennis.